Brother Brian Burns, please.
Thank you very much, Kevin. That's real good. Appreciate it. And especially the simplicity that we can just see through the scriptures. But also, as I'm sure, we can see through history some of the tendencies sometimes to kind of move in the wrong direction. There are times, I'm sure we've all heard and maybe cringed as I have, where we hear maybe a brother named or a congregation named in our area and say, now they are over the work, and they name some country across the world. And personally, I don't even like the term foreign work, because I don't think the Lord sees any work as being foreign if it's His. It's another place of the world to us, but it's not foreign to God. And there's none of us that are or could or should be thought of as being over a work in another place, whether it's another congregation or especially not a country. So I think we need to be careful in our verbiage and also in our actions. Yes, I believe, as we see in the scriptures, many times money is gathered and helped in emergency situations. But emergencies pass. And many times, as we can look at the history of the work in other places, we don't allow the emergency situation to pass, because those emergency funds keep going year after year, decade after decade. And I believe many times it's our fault that we don't allow churches in other places to mature, because we keep doing or providing. And as was mentioned, I think maybe it was last night, or something was said about many times a church can start copying the means of the government. And that's true throughout the world, and it's true here. Our government sends money all over the world just because we have money, and they just send money all over the world. And yes, we are very prosperous here. But money itself does not convert. Money itself is not the work of the church. And many times money itself is an anchor, and we don't allow others to move or to grow. We insist upon the proper way of worship, but I think we may fail in allowing brethren in other places to learn to contribute and to work according to their means. I've used this phrase many times in talking about work in other countries. I believe any place there's a functioning society that is self-sustaining, the church can exist on the same level as that society. But again, many times we don't allow it to do so. And we send in the money to raise their standards that then they can never sustain themselves. So that's a hindrance. Just like we wouldn't just keep supporting our own children on up into adulthood and never allow them to learn how to work and provide for themselves. But sometimes I believe we do that and we don't allow maturity. But I'm not going to redo your topic. I think you did wonderfully, and I appreciate it.
Well, I think your point is exactly right, and of course, fellows like you have a lot more experience in going to other countries and other cultures, but we have to be careful. This is not to raise people's standard of living. That's an excellent point, because that's relative where you are in the world.
Mm-hmm.
In these cases in the Bible, you had people who were starving. I mean, you had famine.
Exactly.
You had persecuted Christians who were losing their means of livelihood. It was a life and death situation, not because they weren't good money managers or just lived in a poor part of the country where they didn't have as nice of a house.
Yeah, that's the point with the emergency situation. They didn't continue to sustain an emergency case. And like those of Macedonia, they were poor. They were poor, but I believe even with the words there in Romans 15, you pointed out, they were poor, but then they were sending help to those who had been reduced to beggary.
They had to beg Paul to take their money.
Yes, they were beggars in that way. But thank you for your presentation and for giving me the opportunity.
Chris Jones and then Noah Howard.
Thank you for your presentation. I really appreciated that. Now, my question, we've kind of talked about this before, but I think it needs to be addressed publicly. As a person who had a lot of group chats with several other preachers and some other members of many different congregations that were coordinating, trying to improve like YouTube videos and stuff like that, how do we make sure or assure that that doesn't become, you know, these missionary societies and stuff like
Well,
that?
that's a very good question, because it's kind of a minefield we have to navigate with modern technology. And, you know, it creates scenarios that we don't read about in the scripture because they didn't have the technology. And you have YouTube, things that go around the world. I think we have to be very, very careful that we keep in perspective who's doing what, on what basis, and what the motive is. And that we don't allow it to evolve into something that is unscriptural. I don't believe it's wrong to use technology. Obviously, I'm a hypocrite if I said that. I don't believe it's wrong to use technology to let the gospel go as far as it will go. I have been very careful. I'll just speak personally. Brett's not here. He can speak for himself. But I've been very careful throughout the 11 years that my program's been on YouTube and been going to other churches have been using it. And really throughout 27 years I've been preaching on TV. I've been very careful and gone to great lengths and emphasized to brethren who want to use the program or have interest in how it works and so forth. I am not trying to be a central organization that's trying to take the world by storm from LaGrange, Georgia. That is not my intention. The YouTube channel belongs to me, and I'm a member of the church at LaGrange, Georgia. I'm accountable to them and their leadership and their oversight. And that channel is my channel, laboring under them. I hope it goes wherever it can go and find honest and sincere hope. But I'm not trying to set up an organization that supplants the local church. And what I emphasize to brethren is, whether they use my program like Oklahoma City does, on the air, what have you, I'm not trying to band churches together into an organization to do that. I'm simply using a background that I have in life, in TV, to produce a product that churches are free to obtain and use it in their local work. And so I'm very careful to emphasize that to brethren.
Brother Noah Howard?
My question is actually along those lines about YouTube, because the nature of YouTube these days is, you know, I, as just Noah, and not as any sort of organization or as anything more formal than just, hey, my name is Noah, and I'm making a video about, you know, the Bible teaches this. I could put that on YouTube, and people watch it, and it can go all over the world. People all over the world can access it. So I guess my question is, if I want to do that, and as an evangelist, and another congregation sees that and they say, we like what you're doing, we want to help you by buying camera equipment, or what, you know, they want to give you money to help do that. Is there a way to receive support from them that doesn't muddle these lines? Because I am an evangelist, I'm at a local congregation, I have elders who are overseeing me, you know.
Well,
How do I navigate that?
you know, a preacher might take funds from other churches to make a trip to Africa or the Philippines, not buy his plane ticket. They're giving money to an individual. They know the work that he's doing, to support him in doing that work with a gentleman's agreement that that's what he's using the money for, is for a tool to assist him in his work. I see a difference in that, and trying to set up an organization that becomes a gospel preaching entity supplanting the local church. We're evangelists who are being sent out by churches to preach, and I think we would all agree, you know, if you see an opportunity to go somewhere, you can go there and preach, you know, and preach the gospel, and hopefully convert people and win souls. And we're doing that under the purview of the church that sends us out, the local church. And our needs as preachers, whether that be our personal support or whether it be tools that equip us, whether it be buying tracts. You know, a church might buy some tracts that a preacher takes and distributes somewhere, or I don't see, I could be wrong, stand corrected. This is you know, the last 50 years, 60 years is a new thing in our people, in our brethren in the world. So, and I want to be very careful. I want to be right. I want to do things the right way. But I don't see the parallel between that and like what Herald of Truth was doing.
So my follow-up question is, how much oversight do my elders have over me as far as how I use that funding from another congregation to carry out, in this example, that YouTube channel?
Well, that's a good question. I think they have the right to know that you're receiving help from a congregation, you know, I think they have that right to know. Whether they micromanage however dime, what it goes to, whether it goes to a camera or whether it goes to a server or whatever, I don't know about that, but, you know, I think as evangelists, we're accountable to somebody. We're accountable to a local church that I think that we're part of, or the church that sends us somewhere, we're accountable to them. But I don't know if that means they micromanage every little, you know, thing we do throughout the day. There's obviously a level of trust that's involved in that. You don't trust a man to be ethical and honest and shouldn't be out preaching anyway. We shouldn't be sending them out. So that gets a little muddy, I'll be the first to admit. But, you know, we have to be very circumspect, no doubt.
We have a few minutes if there are additional questions and comments. One congregation that has received a lot of kind of publicity of recent few weeks is Panama City, Florida. You know, Brother Darrell is ill and had to come to Dallas, so that's where they chose to go to Dallas. And now he and Beverly, and I believe they did all they could do. They did work, they worked hard. I really believe they did.
Yes.
They worked hard, they converted people, but he's got dementia of some sort, it seems to be from what I understand. Now my question is, what can congregations do? There's a tremendous amount of interest in wanting to see that congregation build up and flourish. And right now, you know, they've got a handful of people, but what can congregations do, just using them as an example? I know we have these all over the country, but let's just look at Panama City for example. What can congregations do because they can't afford it financially themselves. Now, they probably have a little, but not a lot. But what do you recommend as a good way to work to build that congregation up and financially in every way?
I think some place that has you know, an attachment or an interest particularly. I mean, we all have an interest in the welfare of the church, but somebody who maybe has a more direct connection to that locality. They want to find a preacher who'd be willing to move in there, and you know, I think multiple churches could support a preacher. I mean, that can be coordinated, but that, of course, it goes straight to the preacher.
Right.
You know, but I think that's Panama City is one of those things. Darrell did, and I'm gonna say that Darrell is to be commended.
Amen.
Darrell went down there against all odds. I went down and preached for them a time or two. They were in a situation before Darrell moved down there to where they had an odd arrangement with their building that was owned by the city, that if they ever went one Sunday without having a service, they'd come take the building. Well, we believe they ought to have services anyway every Sunday. But nonetheless, Cyrus Thompson was the person there at the time. And it was him and a woman from a nursing home, and he had to be out of town one Sunday on a business trip, worship somewhere else. So I had to go and preach for him. There were two people. And I mean, a woman in a nursing home who died like a year later. Darrell went into that. And I'll tell you what, I can't think of a more discouraging situation. And they stuck it out for all those years. And it's not a big congregation, it's a very small congregation, but Darrell did some good. I mean, he got into that community, and him and Beverly were like just doing acts of service in the community where they got acquainted with people. And they won their confidence and had the opportunity to teach them. And I told Beverly, and it takes not long ago, they're to be commended for that. But with that said, as was pointed out in the last session, churches don't last forever. Churches have life cycles. And I think at some point you have to weigh, is there something viable here? Is there something viable here? Are there other alternatives that would be more fruitful than trying to deplete resources from one place to keep that on life support? I haven't been to Panama City now in a few years, so I can't give you a real close assessment, but if a preacher would be willing to go in there, the people who know what's going on at this present time would think it would be viable, I think that'd be the route, you know.
Right. Okay. Well,
But we might need to consider the life cycle of Panama City's over, because it has struggled Or I hope not, and there are a few people left there, now what that has to be considered, what are they gonna do?
Sure. I think they have like maybe 5 now, 1 brother and I think 4
That's
ladies.
more than I thought, so
Yes.
that's, well, that's good.
Okay, okay, Brother Noah.
Well, we had some pitches made for South Africa and Uganda last night, so I want to make a little one for Panama City, because Brother Art, Brother Bobby were just there 3 weeks ago to hold a meeting to see what could be revived there, and we've got a list of between 30 and 50 names and phone numbers of people who live in the neighborhood around the church that want somebody from that church to come visit them.
That's great.
And so, and we haven't even done any social media advertising yet. So if there's anybody who wants to go out there and try to make something happen, there are those of us who would like to help you make that happen.
That'd be wonderful.
Brother Bobby Cunningham.
You know, to your point, is it viable? We went down there, we hit about 300 houses, or not, and Brother Carnegie and Hayden Ayers, and actually we got about 50 good responses, people who, you know, who engaged, had prayer. And if somebody went down there and really, really worked it, I mean, we never ran across anybody that was just negative, get out of here, we're not interested. And there's a neighborhood all around that building. I mean, it's a neighborhood, and the people are very friendly. And I just want to say, you know, and I'm not trying to throw shade on Richard in South Africa and the pitch he made, like, but you know, there are congregations over here that need help. And yeah, it's glamorous to go to South Africa and, hey, baptize 50 people today, but you know, there are people over here, congregations that need help. And I don't know what the solution is. Maybe let it die, I don't know, that's not my decision, but I know it's viable. I know that.
If it's viable, I don't want it to die, that's
Yeah,
for sure.
I do. And we went down there just because Dale and Beverly are friends of ours, you know, we just love what they do. And you're right, you know, he stayed there, 15 years? Went down there for 3 and stayed. And Daryl and Beverly, they just poured themselves into that work. And people loved them around there. They went to all these nursing homes. So it's just a situation that we really felt, you know, we need to do something. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, I think some of the challenge I've seen at Panama City that Darrell tried to really work on, and I think he had disappointments along the way, is just developing a nucleus, a dependable nucleus of leadership. That's kind of been the problem there. Not that there couldn't be people in it, and you do have to have something to build on. And that's part of the challenge there. But if there's interest if there are good and honest hearts there that want the gospel, I'm all for it. Send the gospel there, revive it.
I think, just to add a couple of things, you know, we went down there before and did an outreach about 10 years earlier and had kind of some similar results in terms of interest. But the key focus in any congregation starting up has to be the core teachers, building that teacher responsibility that Nate just talked about. And if that's not able to be done, then we're kidding ourselves to think things are gonna go well. But this, you know, I think one thing that was really encouraging about it is the number of people that wanted to talk when you knocked on their door. The number of people that wanted to have a word of prayer and needed a word of prayer. You know, those are things that, I don't know, in Arizona, we're thankful when we come across houses like that.
Sure.
And I guess the real issue that it kind of comes down to is the bringing in of a full-time, someone who can bring a family, someone who can bring the gospel with the intent of making that their community, their home, and the place where souls do need to be saved. And that's the thing, you know, I think it's easy to mention some of the congregations dying out, but the real question is, here am I, send me. How many people are gonna say that on any of those works? You know, whether it's local, and I'm locally in the community. We have to say that in Glendale, and we tell the people in Glendale at the congregation to say that every day. Let's work on that.
I will say, and this ties back into some of the discussion after needs, I do think that is the viable option. If one is gonna be pursued, is to send an evangelist who will go in and labor like Darrell did. And I don't think it's wise to deplete the resources of those other churches in that area, farming out teachers down there all the time just to keep it going, which is what we've done in a lot of places in the past, because those churches in South Alabama, Oyster Bay, and Florida, they're small. I mean, they need their people there as much as possible. And so, but they want to support a preacher to go, I'm all for it.
Well, I would just add that I think, you know, the amount of effort and focus that it takes is the same that it usually takes in most places. And I think that we've sometimes, and I don't want to say gotten lazy, I would say gotten distracted. And we've got our priorities, that we've got everything else going on. I mean, you know, I know when I raise children too, I know that when kids go into school, everybody has activities for them. And those activities somehow become the parents' activities. And somehow, that Matthew 6:33, where we're seeking first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, the priority's down here now. And that's just something we've got to keep in mind if we don't want to be talking at each preacher study about congregations dying.
The key to that is God's work is done through the local church, but the local church is made up of individual members. The church isn't going to do more work than the members do. And one thing that I have encountered in my teaming work with brethren want to use, not at every place, we got diligent brethren in some of the market, right here in Oklahoma City, one of them. But I have had brethren who want to use my program or Brett's program. And it is very apparent they want a turnkey deal. They want to write a check so they can put you on the air and their building is going to somehow get flooded with new converts. It does not work that way. You're wasting your money and your time. I mean, I'm not saying somebody can't hear the gospel and something good come from it, but if a church isn't going to use that as their tool in their work and get busy, it's futile. And I get very discouraged when places use my program, for example, and leads don't get, when mail doesn't even get answered in a timely fashion, and that's happened. It's reflection on me, it's reflection on the church, but it's a horrible missed opportunity besides that. But brethren sometimes just want to write a check, but it's more than just where the money out of our treasuries go. You know, we need to be teaching our people to be busy, and that goes back to Greg last night.
Do you have a follow-up question? Okay. Brother Greg Gay.
So the getting of money from point A to point B, that means more to me today than it used to. Paul did carry money from multiple congregations to places, and he did so as their representative. It did not become his money. So he took the money the congregations had gathered with literally a separate plan within their giving. They had estimated, here's how much we can give to help this relief. And they gathered that every Sunday, is my understanding. And that was kept separate so that when Paul came by with his entourage, that was ready, it could be picked up and then carried, and the congregation could send people to carry that money if they so chose, or it could be given to Paul to carry on their behalf if they so chose, and it was then taken. So you mentioned Western Union in about 5 seconds, and that becomes, services like that become a huge link. Now, there are some works of the world where some of our preachers and some in this room hand carry money to countries to pass out individually to preachers who are being supported in those countries. Others of us use Western Union or various services like that. But in many cases, that only gets you so far, because you have to have somebody with a place to go get those funds, who then becomes the next agent in line, you might say. And it's not his money, and then he may have a next agent in line, because along the way you end up with people who do not have phones, but yet they may have support, or you may be sending them money for a certain situation which is needed in a place that is so remote that I doubt that I'll ever be there. And so you can have agent upon agent upon agent, but the separation is still clear, and the path is still clear from the original congregation that gave the funds to the destination as was intended from the beginning. But it does get complicated. So when people say, well, I'll just write a check and send it directly to someone in wherever, in Western Uganda or in Eastern Kenya, it's like, well, you know, there's no mail service. And well, I'm going to give you $50, but I want to send it directly. I'm going to wire it. Well, that'll cost you $45. So it's like we work through these, hopefully successfully. Don't ever hesitate to ask anyone, how does the money get to where we're sending it to? But for those who are responsible as the messengers for that, it can be done, I believe, in a scriptural way, and it is being done in a scriptural way. But it's not as simple as, well, unless our check goes to the man who's going to use the funds, then we don't want to help. Well, then you're not going to help in a lot of places.
I agree. There's that messenger element, and, you know, logistics are different from situation to situation. We have to work through logistics. There's a difference between that and evolving into a system where church becomes a sponsoring church, where churches just contribute to an organization or a church or a person that sets up an organization, and they as an organization act and carry out the work.
After me, Brother Madison. I'm just using Panama City as an example, okay? I know right now we have 2 evangelists willing to go for a couple of weeks to kind of follow up on Brother Cunningham and Brother Lynch and their efforts, and they saw that they did have interest. At least interest was shown to that degree of approximately 50 leads. But I know Chris and Noah, for an example, you know, they're willing to go down there for a couple of weeks and work and follow up on those leads and just see what can be developed. And so, but they need money, they need finances to do that. Not necessarily additional support, but hotel, food, you know, just travel expenses, etc. $3,000 to $5,000 probably for a couple of weeks would probably do it. But how do we do that? For an example, you know, I know there are probably other places that's popular as Panama City, but there's a lot of people, you know, even do vacations down that way and all, and that's well and good. But getting the interest level up, if we can't get it for Panama City, I don't know where we're going to be able to get it. For an example, using them, because a lot of people do. Daryl's telling me constantly, oh yeah, so-and-so stopped by this week, somebody else another week and all that. What do you recommend? What would be a good approach? Well, okay, for an example, you got these 2 young evangelists willing to go for a couple of weeks and check it out and follow up on these leads. You have these 2 evangelists who are seasoned evangelists, been doing it for many, many years, just like these guys have been doing it for several years themselves. And so how do we do that? If Panama City can't get it, I don't know where to go from here to get it.
If you have the willingness of somebody to go, maybe approach the congregation where they're a member and say, would you be willing to send them? And if they can support them, great. If not, then let that church send out a letter or, whatever, and say, we have a man who's going to a place where there's a need, a Macedonian call, so to speak, and, his expenses need to be met. The church sends that to him.
What we'd like to see happen is, your topic is right down the line of what we need for those type of situations. Up and down I-35, there's a lot of congregations that are struggling.
Yeah.
And we need to try to figure out ways to help them and ton of other places too. But I really appreciate your input. Go ahead.
And this goes back to what Brian said. I do think in a situation like that, we have to be careful that we act through the work of an evangelist. For example, let's say Oyster Bay sends somebody over there to work in that capacity. In a sense, yes, Oyster Bay is spearheading, sending that man out. But that work becomes that evangelist working, that's Panama City's work, with that evangelist working with them. And yes, that evangelist is under the oversight of Oyster Bay or whoever sends him. He's accountable to them. But Oyster Bay doesn't then oversee Panama City.
Right.
They oversee the man who's working in Panama City.
Mm-hmm.
But, whether he's preaching the doctrine of Christ and doing what he's supposed to do. But, Panama City is its own congregation. And
Your lesson was wonderful. I'm just trying to figure out a way, using this one example. Brother Madison.
Brother Kevin, I appreciate everything that you've said. It takes me back to when I was hired into corrections, and I retired out of corrections. And I would always, the inmates knew that I was in the teaching field. And they would always come up and ask me about preaching, because they got a false concept of what it means to be a preacher because of Joel Osteen, Joyce Myers, Creflo Dollar, T.D. Jakes. And they looked at all the monetary things that they have gained. And it was several of them. They come out of Chicago. It was all about how they could sit back and come to the concept how they can become wealthy by using the word of God to do so. I said, your heart is going to perish with you, because you cannot think that you can come into this field for monetary gain. Your heart has to be right, first of all, because you have to be considered, because you want to save souls, not destroy souls. I said, and don't use those men and women as examples of what it means to preach the gospel. Go back to the book, the foundation of the book. Jesus sent them out. And the purpose that he sent them out was to save souls, not to gain anything from that. So my thing is, if one wants to be a great teacher, I'm in a position now where I am retired, but I wasn't always retired. But I want to be able to help, but I first have to start in the community where I am, to be able to build a solid foundation to where I can go help another a community that's struggling very seriously. We're a small congregation as well. We struggle. We done went from numbers up to numbers down because of debt, and people are still dying. So my hopes is, and we've had brethren that wants to come down. We had brethren that come down to try to help out in the community, but everybody's not interested in the community because of everybody's not interested in being a part of the church because of YouTube. They say I can get on YouTube and listen, and I don't even have to leave my home. So that's one for you. What do you think?
Well, I'm sure which part of that to address first, but YouTube is a blessing and a curse. The internet is a blessing and a curse. That's all I know. It has opened up a lot of opportunities, and then it's raised a lot of questions and scenarios that are hard to know how to scripturally deal with. But one of the problems with it is, boy, I can get on a tangent here and go down the rabbit trail. The internet has changed so many things for the worse in the church, I think. And I could spend all day talking about how I think that's true for all the good it can do. But one is, it has changed people's perception of the church, and they do think I can just, and I'll say this, I think the internet, this gets back to my idea of the local church, I think the internet has subtly influenced the way we think about our relationship to the church, because we are so interconnected now. We are so linked to people all around the country all of the time. And if we're not careful, lines get blurred and we lose that very strong connection and identity that we need to have with the local body. We are not members of the church at large. And I fear there are some people that feel that way. And that's seen in their attendance. They might be here, they might be there, and it's not wrong to visit. You know, we go on vacation, and circumstances take us from place to place. But some people just drift about, one meeting to the next, one young people's meeting to the next. And I think that gets out of hand because we lose sight of the fact we're a part of the body. And on a practical level, being a part of the body means I'm part of the local congregation, not the universal church. I'm a needed and vital part of that connected local body. The internet has been detrimental to that.
Would you like to do a summation here?
No, I enjoyed the discussion, and like I say, I don't have all the answers, because modern technology raises a lot of questions, I'll be the first to admit to you. But I do think we need to be very circumspect and not allow our zeal and enthusiasm for the good that we see we can do to override our concern for doing things the right way.